They sealed it off without explanation, and what park rangers discovered deep inside a restricted cave beneath the Grand Canyon has officials scrambling to keep it quiet. But it's too late, because what emerged from the darkness as the waters receded matches a warning given 2,000 years ago, a warning that most people ignored until now. The Grand Canyon, one of the world's most magnificent natural wonders, stretching 277 miles long, plunging over a mile deep, carved by the relentless Colorado River over millions of years, has always held secrets in its ancient rock layers, but nothing like this, nothing that connects modern discoveries to biblical prophecy with such terrifying precision. In 1909, two explorers stumbled upon something that should have rewritten history books: an underground city filled with artifacts that didn't belong there. Giant mummies, over 8 feet tall. Egyptian hieroglyphs on cave walls in Arizona, thousands of miles from Egypt, and tunnels stretching deep into the earth like prison cells, designed to hold something powerful, something dangerous. The Smithsonian denied everything. No records, no evidence, no expedition ever took place. But now, as rivers around the world dry up at unprecedented rates, as ancient structures emerge from receding waters, as mysterious caves reveal themselves in places the Bible specifically mentioned, people are starting to ask the questions authorities don't want answered. What if those explorers really found something? What if it's still down there? And what if Jesus warned us this exact moment was coming? The story begins in the spring of 1909, when a man named G.E. Kincaid, an experienced explorer from Idaho, who had spent over 30 years traversing the rugged wilderness of the American West, embarked on what would become one of the most controversial expeditions in archaeological history, accompanied by Professor S.A. Jordan, a distinguished archaeologist with deep connections to the Smithsonian Institution, who had dedicated his career to uncovering the hidden secrets of ancient civilizations that mainstream academia refused to acknowledge. Kincaid was traveling down the Colorado River, collecting geological samples and mapping unexplored sections of the Grand Canyon, when something caught his attention. High above the waterline, about 1,480 feet up the sheer cliff face, there appeared to be an entrance carved into the rock face, an opening that looked far too symmetrical, too deliberate to be a natural formation created by wind and water erosion over millions of years. The entrance itself showed unmistakable signs of ancient craftsmanship, with smooth walls and precise angles that suggested advanced engineering knowledge, and as Kincaid carefully climbed up to investigate, getting closer with each difficult step, he realized this was no ordinary cave. This was a doorway into something that had been sealed away from the world for thousands of years, waiting in darkness for the moment it would be discovered. What he found inside would challenge everything historians thought they knew about pre-Columbian America. Beyond the entrance lay a vast network of dark passages and corridors, stretching deep into the heart of the canyon, like veins running through the ancient rock. And as Kincaid ventured further into the labyrinth, the air grew noticeably colder, and the passages narrowed in some places, forcing him to crouch and squeeze through tight spaces. But his determination pushed him forward, because he knew he had stumbled upon something extraordinary, something that could change history. The tunnels led to massive chambers carved out of solid rock, with ceilings so high they disappeared into darkness beyond the reach of his torchlight, and the walls were smooth polished, almost as if they had been worked by master stonemasons, using tools and techniques that shouldn't have existed thousands of years ago in this remote corner of the American Southwest. But it was what filled these chambers that made Kincaid's blood run cold. Scattered throughout the rooms were artifacts unlike anything found in Native American archaeological sites. Pottery with intricate designs depicting strange animals and deities that bore no resemblance to local tribal art, weapons made of copper and bronze metals that required sophisticated metallurgical knowledge to produce, and tools that showed a level of technological advancement far exceeding what historians attributed to the indigenous peoples of the region. And then there were the statues. Carved from stone and positioned throughout the chambers were idols and religious figures that looked distinctly Egyptian in style, their faces serene and mysterious, their bodies adorned with symbols and hieroglyphics that Kincaid recognized from his limited knowledge of ancient Egypt. But what were Egyptian artifacts doing buried deep inside the Grand Canyon, thousands of miles from the Nile Valley, separated by an entire ocean? The most shocking discovery, however, came when Kincaid entered what appeared to be a burial chamber. There, resting in alcoves carved into the walls, were mummies wrapped in dark linen cloth and preserved with such care that their features were still visible beneath the wrappings. But these weren't ordinary mummies. These were giants standing over 8 feet tall. According to Kincaid's measurements, their massive frames barely fitting into the spaces prepared for them. The preservation was remarkable testament to the arid conditions deep within the cave that had kept moisture and decay at bay for millennia. And when Kincaid examined the burial goods placed alongside the mummies, he found jewelry made of precious metals, small figurines of gold and silver, and most intriguing of all, crystal orbs that seemed to emit a faint glow even in the darkness, as if they contained some kind of internal light source that defied explanation. Kincaid knew immediately that this discovery was too important to keep to himself, so he carefully documented everything he saw, taking detailed notes and sketches of the artifacts, the layout of the chambers, and the hieroglyphics that covered the walls. And then he made his way back through the tunnels, emerged from the cave entrance, and traveled to contact Professor S.A. Jordan, who he knew would understand the magnitude of what had been found. Jordan arrived within weeks, bringing with him a team of assistants and equipment to conduct a proper archaeological expedition, and together they spent months exploring the underground city, mapping its extent, and carefully cataloging the thousands of artifacts they discovered in chamber after chamber. The complex was enormously far larger than Kincaid had initially realized, with some estimates suggesting the tunnels and rooms could have housed up to 50,000 people at one time, making it one of the largest ancient structures ever found in North America, if the claims were true. They discovered expansive plazas where the ancient inhabitants might have gathered for ceremonies, or commerce-functional waterways that still carried water from mysterious springs deep within the earth, channeling it through carved aqueducts with engineering precision, and storage rooms filled with grain jars that had somehow remained sealed for thousands of years, their contents remarkably well preserved in the dry climate. But the most compelling evidence of an Egyptian connection came from the hieroglyphics. Covering the walls of the main chambers were rows upon rows of symbols that Jordan immediately recognized as similar to ancient Egyptian writing, though with some variations that suggested either an earlier form of the language or a regional dialect that had evolved independently after the builders had somehow made their way to the Americas. Jordan spent weeks trying to decipher the inscriptions, working by torchlight in the cool darkness of the caves. And while he couldn't translate everything, he claimed to identify references to Egyptian deities, mentions of a great journey across water, and records of a kingdom established in a new land far from the rising sun. The implications were staggering. If this discovery was authentic, it meant that ancient Egyptians, or a closely related civilization, had reached the Americas thousands of years before Columbus, before the Vikings, before any previously accepted transoceanic contact, and had established a thriving society deep within the protective walls of the Grand Canyon, hidden from the outside world. But how had they traveled across the Atlantic Ocean with the technology available in ancient times? Why had they chosen this particular location so far inland from any coast? And what had happened to them? Why were there only mummies and artifacts left behind with no signs of living descendants? These questions haunted Jordan as he carefully packed up the most significant artifacts, preparing to transport them back to the Smithsonian Institution where they could be properly studied, analyzed, and displayed for the world to see. He selected the most intact mummies, wrapped them in protective materials, and loaded them onto pack animals for the difficult journey out of the canyon, along with crates filled with pottery, weapons, tools, jewelry, and several of the mysterious crystal orbs that continued to fascinate everyone who saw them. The expedition officially concluded in late 1909, and Jordan submitted his full report to the Smithsonian, along with photographs, sketches, detailed maps of the underground complex, and of course the artifacts themselves, which he assumed would soon be put on display and would revolutionize American archaeology. And then, something very strange happened. Nothing. The Smithsonian acknowledged receipt of Jordan's materials, and then went completely silent. No press releases, no academic papers, no public announcements about what should have been the archaeological discovery of the century. Jordan wrote letters requesting updates on the analysis of the artifacts, asking when the findings would be published, and inquiring about plans for further expeditions to fully excavate the site, but his letters went unanswered, or received only brief non-committal replies that offered no real information. Months turned into years, and still nothing emerged from the Smithsonian about the Grand Canyon expedition. And then, the denials began. When researchers and journalists began asking the Smithsonian Institution about the Kincaid-Jordan expedition, in the decades that followed, the Smithsonian's response was clear, direct, and absolute. There was no expedition, there were no Egyptian artifacts found in the Grand Canyon, no mummies, no underground city, and no records of anyone named G.E. Kincaid or Professor S.A. Jordan ever working with or submitting materials to the institution. The discovery that should have rewritten American history had been completely erased from official records as if it never happened at all. But how could such a monumental find simply disappear? How could months of exploration, detailed documentation, thousands of artifacts, and the involvement of multiple people just vanish without a trace, leaving behind only newspaper articles from 1909 that describe the discovery in remarkable detail before falling silent forever? The Smithsonian's denial was so firm, so unwavering, that it forced many people to conclude that either the entire story was an elaborate hoax fabricated by newspapers looking for sensational content to sell more copies, or something far more disturbing was taking place, a deliberate, systematic cover-up designed to suppress evidence that contradicted established historical narratives and threatened to upset the carefully constructed understanding of how human civilization developed in the Americas. The official explanation from the Smithsonian was straightforward. They had thoroughly searched their archives and found absolutely no documentation of any expedition to the Grand Canyon. In 1909, no correspondence with anyone named Jordan, no acquisition records for Egyptian artifacts from Arizona, no photographs or sketches or maps matching the descriptions given in the newspaper accounts, and no evidence that such materials had ever been in their possession. Furthermore, the Smithsonian pointed out that their institutional policies required meticulous record-keeping of all acquisitions and expeditions, meaning that if such a significant discovery had actually occurred, there would be extensive documentation, purchase orders, shipping manifests, storage records, and internal memos discussing how to handle and display such revolutionary findings. The absence of any such records, the Smithsonian argued, proved conclusively that the Grand Canyon Egyptian city was nothing more than a tall tale that had somehow captured public imagination for a brief moment before being forgotten by everyone except conspiracy theorists who refused to accept the obvious truth that it never happened. But critics of the Smithsonian's position raised troubling questions that the institution never adequately addressed. Why would newspapers in 1909 publish such detailed, specific descriptions of the artifacts, the layout of the underground chambers, and the hieroglyphic inscriptions, unless reporters had actually seen evidence or spoken to credible sources? What motivation would journalists have to fabricate such an elaborate story that could easily be disproven and damage their professional reputations? And why did the Smithsonian wait so long to issue their denial, allowing decades to pass before officially stating that no such expedition occurred, almost as if they were hoping the story would simply fade from public memory and never need to be addressed at all? Some researchers began investigating whether the Smithsonian had a pattern of suppressing archaeological discoveries that didn't fit conventional historical narratives, and what they found was disturbing. Multiple accounts emerged over the years of artifacts being donated to the Smithsonian, were sent there for analysis only to disappear into the institution's vast storage facilities, never to be seen again, never cataloged, never studied, never made available to other researchers who might draw different conclusions from the evidence. There were reports of ancient stone tablets with unusual inscriptions sent to the Smithsonian from various locations across the United States, tablets that seemed to show evidence of pre-Columbian contact with Old World civilizations. But when donors or researchers tried to follow up on these items, they were told the Smithsonian had no record of ever receiving them, despite having signed receipts and correspondence proving otherwise. There were claims of skeletal remains of unusually tall individuals, 7, 8, even 9 feet tall, discovered in burial mounds across the Midwest and sent to the Smithsonian for analysis. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, remains that could have provided evidence that giants once walked the earth, just as the Bible describes in Genesis and Numbers. But when anthropologists tried to study these skeletons decades later, they had mysteriously vanished from the Smithsonian's collections with no explanation for their disappearance. There were stories of Roman coins, Viking runestones, and ancient Hebrew inscriptions found in North America, all supposedly sent to the Smithsonian, all supposedly lost or misplaced, or never received, depending on which explanation the institution offered at any given time. A pattern seemed to emerge. The Smithsonian welcomed artifacts that confirmed the accepted timeline of human migration to the Americas, but anything that suggested earlier contact advanced pre-Columbian civilizations or connections to biblical accounts of ancient history had a tendency to disappear. But why would the Smithsonian engage in such a cover-up? What possible motivation could they have for hiding evidence of ancient civilizations in the Americas? Several theories emerged to explain institutional behavior. Some suggested the Smithsonian was protecting established academic reputations and careers because admitting that Egyptian or other Old World civilizations had reached the Americas thousands of years ago would invalidate decades of scholarly work, countless published papers, university courses, and the professional legacies of prominent archaeologists who had built their careers on the conventional narrative of isolated development in the New World. The embarrassment and professional damage would be catastrophic for the academic community and institutions like the Smithsonian that had endorsed and promoted these now discredited theories for generations. And others argued the cover-up was designed to protect Native American cultural heritage and sovereignty because if ancient Egyptians or other outside civilizations had established major settlements in North America, it could undermine modern Native American land claims and treaty rights by suggesting they weren't actually the first inhabitants of the continent. The Smithsonian, they claimed, was trying to prevent political and legal chaos that could result from such revelations, even if it meant suppressing legitimate archaeological evidence. A third theory suggested the cover-up was motivated by religious considerations, because the Smithsonian, as a government-funded institution, needed to maintain strict separation of church and state, and any discovery that seemed to confirm biblical accounts of giants, ancient migrations, or advanced antediluvian civilizations would be seen as giving credibility to religious texts over scientific naturalism. This could open the door to religious interpretations of archaeology and history, which secular academic institutions had worked hard to eliminate from mainstream scholarship for over a century. And then there were darker theories. Some researchers claimed the Smithsonian was working in coordination with secret government agencies to suppress knowledge of advanced ancient technologies that could disrupt modern power structures, particularly in the energy and transportation sectors, because if ancient civilizations possessed knowledge or capabilities that exceeded our current understanding, it would raise uncomfortable questions about human history and whether we're actually progressing or perhaps rediscovering things that were once known and then lost. Others suggested the cover-up extended beyond just archaeology into the realm of suppressing evidence of non-human intelligence, whether ancient aliens, interdimensional beings, or Nephilim, the hybrid offspring of fallen angels and human women, described in Genesis chapter 6, because admitting such entities existed and influenced human civilization would shatter the materialist worldview that dominates modern science and education. Whatever the true motivation, the result was the same. The Grand Canyon Egyptian city disappeared from official history, the artifacts vanished, the explorers were erased from records, and anyone who mentioned the 1909 expedition was dismissed as a conspiracy theorist or someone who couldn't distinguish between newspaper sensationalism and actual archaeological evidence. But the story refused to die completely. Over the decades, independent researchers continued investigating, tracking down descendants of people who claimed to have known Kincaid or Jordan, searching for any surviving documentation, analyzing the original newspaper articles for clues, and even attempting to locate the cave entrance based on the descriptions given in early reports. Some claimed to have found it, but said the area was now strictly off-limits, patrolled by park rangers, and designated as protected territory for reasons that were never fully explained, with access denied to all civilians, regardless of their credentials or research purposes. Others reported that satellite imagery of the Grand Canyon showed unusual rectangular formations and symmetrical structures in cliff faces that didn't appear to be natural geological features. But when they tried to investigate further, they were turned away by authorities who cited safety concerns, environmental protection, or sacred Native American sites as justification for the restrictions. The fact that the Smithsonian continued to deny the expedition's existence, even as evidence mounted that something significant had been discovered, only fueled more suspicion and more questions. What exactly are they hiding in those restricted sections of the Grand Canyon? Why won't they allow independent verification? And if the 1909 expedition really was just a hoax, why does the government continue to restrict access to the very areas where the underground city was supposedly located? The answers might lie buried in the Smithsonian's vast storage facilities, which contain an estimated 146 million artifacts and specimens, only a tiny fraction of which are ever displayed to the public, with the rest locked away in climate-controlled warehouses where they sit unseen, unstudied, and inaccessible to researchers who might ask uncomfortable questions. Somewhere in those endless rows of storage boxes, there might be Egyptian pottery from Arizona giant mummies wrapped in dark linen crystal orbs that glow in the darkness, and evidence that would force us to completely rewrite the story of human civilization in the Americas. But we'll probably never know for certain because the Smithsonian has made it very clear they have no intention of this opening their archives to scrutiny or admitting that anything about the official narrative might be incomplete. And meanwhile, in the restricted zones of the Grand Canyon, something waits in the darkness. Today, over a century after the alleged Kincaid-Jordan expedition, the Grand Canyon remains one of the most heavily regulated and restricted national parks in the United States, with vast sections completely off-limits to the public areas where even experienced researchers with proper credentials find their access applications denied without explanation, and zones that are patrolled so carefully that anyone who wanders too close is immediately escorted away by park rangers who refuse to answer questions about what they're protecting. The official reasons given for these restrictions vary depending on who you ask and which area you're inquiring about. Some zones are designated as sacred Native American sites that must be preserved and protected from disturbance out of respect for indigenous cultural heritage and spiritual practices that have been connected to these locations for thousands of years predating modern American occupation of the region. Other restricted areas are classified as ecologically sensitive habitats for endangered species, where human presence could disrupt delicate ecosystems, threaten wildlife populations, or damage geological formations that took millions of years to develop and cannot be replaced once destroyed by careless visitors who fail to appreciate the fragility of the natural environment. Still, other sections are marked as geologically unstable zones where rockslides, erosion, and crumbling cliff faces make it too dangerous for civilians to enter without specialized equipment, and training areas where liability concerns and safety regulations require the National Park Service to prohibit access to protect visitors from potential injury or death. These explanations sound reasonable enough on the surface, and most visitors to the Grand Canyon accept them without question. Assuming that government agencies are simply doing their job to preserve natural wonders and protect public safety in a landscape as vast and dangerous as the canyon's 277 miles of rugged terrain. But researchers who have studied the patterns of restricted zones and compared them to the descriptions given in the 1909 newspaper accounts have noticed something disturbing. The areas with the strictest access controls and the most aggressive enforcement by park rangers correspond almost exactly to the locations where Kincaid claimed to have found the cave entrance leading to the underground Egyptian city. Coincidence, or something being deliberately hidden? The process for obtaining research permits to access restricted areas of the Grand Canyon has become increasingly difficult over the past few decades, with applications that once took weeks to process now taking months or even years, and many qualified researchers reporting that their requests are simply denied with vague explanations about competing priorities, limited resources, or concerns about environmental impact that seem designed to discourage further inquiry rather than address legitimate questions. Even researchers with impeccable credentials, decades of experience and funding from major universities, find themselves unable to gain access to certain areas, leading many to conclude that the restrictions have nothing to do with safety or conservation, and everything to do with preventing investigation of something the authorities want to keep hidden from public view. Modern technology should make it easier to explore these mysteries without ever setting foot in restricted zones. Satellite imagery can provide detailed aerial views of the entire canyon. Ground-penetrating radar can reveal underground structures and caverns without disturbing the surface, and LiDAR technology can create three-dimensional maps of cliff faces showing features invisible to the naked eye. But here's where things get even stranger when independent researchers have used these technologies to scan the restricted areas. They've reported finding anomalies that shouldn't exist according to conventional geology. Rectangular formations that appear artificial symmetrical patterns that don't match natural rock layers, and what some describe as void spaces deep within the cliffs, suggesting the presence of chambers or tunnels exactly where you would expect to find them based on Kincaid's descriptions. Yet when these researchers try to publish their findings or request permission to investigate further, they encounter resistance. Their papers are rejected by academic journals, Without peer review, their funding applications are denied, their university positions come under scrutiny, and in some cases they report harassment, intimidation, and threats that convince them to abandon their research and never speak publicly about what they discovered. The message is clear. Some questions are not meant to be asked, and some discoveries are not meant to be made. But it's not just researchers who have noticed strange things happening in the Grand Canyon. Visitors to the park have reported phenomena that can't be easily explained, experiences that suggest something unusual is present in those ancient rock formations, something that has been there for a very long time. Smash that thumbs up button and leave a comment below if you think the government is hiding ancient secrets in the Grand Canyon, and share this video with friends who need to know the truth about what's really happening in these restricted zones. Over the years, the Grand Canyon has developed a disturbing reputation among certain visitors who return home with stories of unexplained experiences that don't match the peaceful natural beauty the park is famous for. Stories of strange sounds echoing from deep within the canyon walls at night. Sounds that witnesses describe as groaning or wailing, almost human, but not quite with a quality that makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck and creates an overwhelming sense of dread. Some hikers report hearing what sounds like metal chains dragging across stone, coming from areas where no mining or construction has taken place, sounds that seem to originate from beneath their feet, as if something is moving in tunnels far below the surface, struggling against restraints that have held it for centuries. Others describe seeing shadowy figures moving along cliff faces in the moonlight, silhouettes that appear humanoid but wrong in some indefinable way, too tall or moving in ways that don't match normal human locomotion figures that vanish when observers try to get a closer look, leaving no trace of their presence except a lingering feeling of being watched. And then there are the artifacts, the items that visitors take home as souvenirs, despite park regulations prohibiting the removal of anything from the Grand Canyon rocks. Stones, pieces of wood, fragments of ancient pottery. Small things that seem harmless enough but bring with them consequences that the people who took them never expected. The National Park Service has an entire department dedicated to handling returned items, packages that arrive almost daily containing rocks or artifacts, along with letters from people begging the park to take them back, pleading for forgiveness, and describing the string of misfortunes that began the moment they removed these objects from the canyon. One letter describes a visitor who took a colorful stone as a keepsake and immediately began experiencing health problems. Unexplained pain, chronic fatigue symptoms that doctors couldn't diagnose, or treat problems that persisted for months until in desperation, the person mailed the stone back to the Grand Canyon with a letter asking for the canyon's forgiveness, and within days the symptoms vanished completely as if they had never existed. Another account tells of a family that collected small pieces of pottery from a remote area of the canyon and brought them home only to face a cascade of disasters, car accidents, financial ruin, relationship problems, and a series of coincidences so unlikely that the family became convinced the artifacts were cursed. They returned everything they had taken with a detailed apology and claimed that their luck immediately changed for the better. These stories are dismissed by skeptics as superstition, coincidence, or psychological suggestion, people experiencing normal problems and attributing them to artifacts because humans naturally seek patterns and explanations for the random chaos of life. But the sheer volume of these reports, the consistency of the experiences, and the fact that problems seem to resolve immediately after items are returned suggests something more than mere coincidence might be at work. Native American tribes who have lived in and around the Grand Canyon for thousands of years have their own explanations for these phenomena. The Hopi people speak of Kachinas, spiritual beings that serve as messengers between the physical and spiritual worlds, entities that dwell in the canyon and serve as guardians of sacred sites, protecting them from those who would disturb or desecrate places of power. According to Hopi tradition, these Kachinas are not always benevolent towards outsiders. They can be mischievous or even hostile to those who show disrespect, who take what doesn't belong to them, or who intrude into areas where they have no business being, and the consequences of angering these guardians can be severe. One particular location within the Grand Canyon holds special significance in Hopi cosmology, the Sipapu, a place they believe serves as a gateway between the physical world and the spirit realm, the point where souls pass from one plane of existence to another. The exact location of the Sipapu is kept secret, known only to Hopi spiritual leaders, but it is said to be marked by a particular formation in the rock, A doorway of sorts that appears natural but carries profound spiritual significance, and those who have seen it describe an overwhelming sense of ancient power and presence that makes it clear this is not a place for casual visitors. Interestingly, when researchers using satellite imagery and Google Earth have scoured the Grand Canyon looking for unusual formations, they discovered something remarkable. A structure in a remote section of the canyon that appears for all the world like a perfectly rectangular doorway carved into a cliff face with proportions and symmetry that don't appear anywhere else in the surrounding geology. The discovery sparked intense speculation online, with theories ranging from the mundane to the extraordinary. Some suggested it was simply an unusual erosion pattern or a trick of light and shadow. Others claimed it was evidence of ancient architectural works possibly connected to the alleged Egyptian city, while still others proposed even more exotic explanations involving extraterrestrial visitors or interdimensional portals. The rectangular doorway remains unexplained, and of course it sits within a restricted zone where access is denied to anyone who might want to investigate further. What is that doorway? Where does it lead? And why does it appear in precisely the area where ancient prophecies and modern discoveries seem to converge? The questions multiply, but the answers remain locked away behind official denials. There's restricted access zones and a wall of silence that has stood for over a century. While the alleged Egyptian city and mysterious doorways capture the imagination with their controversial claims and conspiracy theories, the Grand Canyon has also yielded completely legitimate scientific discoveries that prove beyond any doubt that this ancient landscape holds secrets buried for millions of years. Secrets that emerge only when conditions are exactly right, when the right person happens to be in the right place at precisely the right moment, to witness something that has been hidden since long before humans walked the earth. In 2016, a Norwegian geology professor named Alan Krill was hiking along the popular Bright Angel Trail with a group of students, enjoying the spectacular views and teaching them about the rock formations that tell the story of Earth's geological history, when something unusual caught his eye during a routine stop to examine exposed rock layers. A large boulder had recently fallen from the cliff face above, breaking apart on impact and revealing a fresh surface that hadn't been exposed to weathering or erosion. And there, on that newly revealed stone surface, Krill noticed markings that didn't look like random cracks or mineral deposits. These were patterns deliberately repeating symmetrical. They were footprints. Krill immediately recognized the potential significance of what he was seeing and took detailed photographs from multiple angles, capturing the size, shape, and arrangement of the tracks before continuing his hike. But his mind kept returning to those markings, wondering what creature could have left them, and more importantly, how old they might be. When he returned to his office, he sent the photographs to a colleague, Stephen Rowland, a paleontologist at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, who specialized in trace fossils, the preserved evidence of ancient animal activity like footprints, burrows, and feeding marks that provide invaluable information about how extinct creatures lived and moved. Rowland studied the images carefully, comparing them to known fossil trackways, examining the stride pattern, the depth of the impressions, and the anatomical details visible in the prints, and his analysis led to a stunning conclusion. These were the tracks of an amniote, a four-legged vertebrate that laid hard-shelled eggs, and the rock layer they were preserved in dated back approximately 313 million years. This made them the oldest vertebrate trackway ever discovered in the Grand Canyon, predating previous finds by millions of years and providing unprecedented insight into the early evolution of land-dwelling animals during a crucial period when life was transitioning from aquatic to terrestrial environments. The Monocacha Formation, where the tracks were found, consists of sandstone that was originally deposited in a coastal sand dune environment, meaning these ancient creatures were walking across windswept beaches when the area that is now the Grand Canyon was at the edge of a shallow sea during the Paleozoic era. Rowland's detailed study, published in a peer-reviewed scientific journal, concluded that the tracks were made by two distinct animals crossing the same area at different times, one moving in a deliberate diagonal pattern using what paleontologists call a lateral sequence gait, where the animal steps with its left rear foot, then left front foot, then right rear foot, then right front foot, a walking pattern common among early reptiles. The second set of tracks suggested faster movement, possibly running or scrambling, with a less regular pattern that indicated urgency or alarm. The creatures themselves were relatively small, about 12 inches long, roughly the size of a modern iguana. But their significance was enormous because they represented a critical stage in vertebrate evolution when animals were adapting to life on land, developing new locomotion strategies, and exploiting ecological niches that had previously been empty. This discovery demonstrates something crucial. The Grand Canyon is an archive of Earth's history with rock layers preserving evidence of environments, creatures, and events that existed hundreds of millions of years ago, and sometimes all it takes is one rock falling at the right time to reveal secrets that have waited eons to be discovered. But fossils from 300 to 13 million years ago aren't the only ancient remains hidden within the canyon's walls. Caves scattered throughout the area contain evidence of much more recent inhabitants. From a mere 40,000 years ago, creatures that lived during the last ice age, when the climate and environment of the region were dramatically different from today. In 1936, explorers discovered Rampart Cave located in the far western end of the Grand Canyon at an elevation of about 1,750 feet, and what they found inside was so unusual, so perfectly preserved, that it seemed impossible given the thousands of years that had passed since these materials were deposited. The cave floor was covered with dung bowling ball-sized droppings piled in organized heaps as if they had been left there just days ago, but radiocarbon dating revealed these fecal deposits were between 11,000 and 40,000 years old, left behind by Shasta ground sloths, massive herbivores that stood about 9 feet tall, weighed around 500 pounds, and roamed the southwestern United States until they went extinct at the end of the Pleistocene epoch. The arid conditions inside the cave had perfectly preserved the dung, which still contained identifiable plant material that scientists could analyze to determine exactly what these ancient sloths were eating, revealing a diet of globe mallow Mormon tea, saltbush catclaw, various cacti reeds, and yucca plants that grew in the area during the Ice Age. This information allowed researchers to reconstruct the ancient ecosystem, understanding which plants thrived in the cooler, wetter climate of the Pleistocene, and how the environment changed as the Ice Age ended. Temperatures rose, and the region became the arid desert we see today. But the sloth dung wasn't the only treasure hidden in Grand Canyon caves. Paleontologist Chester Stock, working in the 1930s, discovered skulls of Harrington's mountain goat, an extinct species that had never been scientifically documented before, a smaller, short-haired cousin of modern mountain goats that disappeared around 11,000 years ago, along with many other Ice Age megafauna. The dry cave environment had preserved not just bones, but also mummified remains of bats and condors, with skin tissue, feathers, and even internal organs still intact, allowing for chemical analysis that would have been impossible with ordinary fossils, where only mineralized bone survives. Steve Emsley, a biology professor at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, who specializes in avian paleontology, studied the mummified condors and made a fascinating discovery by analyzing the preserved tissue. He could determine what these ancient birds had been eating, and the results showed they were feeding on megafauna, the large Ice Age mammals like ground sloths, mammoths, camels, and horses that roamed North America during the Pleistocene. When these megafauna went extinct around 11,000 years ago, the condor population crashed as well because their primary food source disappeared, and the species nearly went extinct, surviving only in small, isolated populations that managed to adapt to feeding on smaller carcasses. Today, California condors are critically endangered, with intensive conservation efforts required to prevent their complete extinction. But the mummified remains in Grand Canyon caves tell the story of a time when these magnificent birds soared over a landscape filled with giant animals, a lost world that vanished when the climate changed and human hunters arrived in North America. The preservation in these caves is so remarkable that scientists have been able to extract DNA from some specimens, opening possibilities for genetic studies that can reveal relationships between extinct and living species, trace evolutionary changes over thousands of years, and potentially even contribute to de-extinction efforts if technology advances to the point where lost species can be resurrected from ancient genetic material. These legitimate discoveries prove that the Grand Canyon is indeed a treasure trove of ancient secrets, and that patient scientific investigation can reveal astonishing truths about Earth's past without requiring conspiracy theories or cover-up allegations. The canyon's unique geology, with its mile-deep layers of exposed rock, combined with the arid climate that preserves organic materials for tens of thousands of years, creates perfect conditions for discovering evidence of lost worlds, whether from 313 million years ago or merely 40,000 years ago. And if scientifically verified discoveries like ancient footprints and Ice Age mummies can remain hidden for millions of years until chance reveals them, what else might be waiting in unexplored caves and restricted zones in chambers that haven't been opened since they were sealed by ancient hands for purposes we can only guess at? The legitimate finds make the controversial claims seem less impossible because we know for certain that the Grand Canyon preserves things that should have decayed long ago. So when people report finding Egyptian artifacts or hearing strange sounds or seeing mysterious doorways carved into cliff faces, maybe the question isn't whether such things could exist in the Grand Canyon, but rather, what else is down there that we haven't found yet? The Colorado River, one of the most important waterways in North America, begins its 450-mile journey high in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, flowing through 7 states, carving the magnificent Grand Canyon over millions of years, providing water to 40 million people, supplying irrigation for thousands of farms, and sustaining ecosystems that depend entirely on its life-giving flow. But today, this mighty river faces a crisis that threatens not just the natural wonder of the Grand Canyon, but the survival of cities, agriculture, and entire populations across the American Southwest. The river is dying. Water levels have dropped to unprecedented lows, revealing sections of riverbed that haven't been exposed in decades, leaving boats stranded, marinas sitting hundreds of feet from the water's edge, and intake pipes for major cities sucking air instead of water as reservoirs shrink to fractions of their designed capacity. Lake Mead, the massive reservoir created by Hoover Dam and the largest reservoir in the United States by total water capacity, has fallen to just 27% of its full volume, with stark white bathtub rings on the surrounding cliffs, showing exactly how far the water has dropped since the reservoir was filled. In the 1930s, creating a visual record of decline that becomes more dramatic with each passing year. Lake Powell, formed by Glen Canyon Dam upstream from the Grand Canyon, tells the same story of catastrophic depletion, with water levels so low that the famous Rainbow Bridge National Monument now sits high above the waterline, and boat ramps that once provided access to the lake now end in mid-air, hundreds of feet above the receding shoreline. The causes of this crisis are complex and interconnected. A combination of prolonged drought-reduced snowpack in the Rocky Mountains, increasing temperatures due to climate change evaporation rates that exceed inflow, and most significantly, decades of overallocation, where more water was promised to cities, farmers, and states than the river could sustainably provide, even in good years. The Colorado River Compact, signed in 1922, divided water rights among 7 states based on flow measurements taken during an unusually wet period, creating legal obligations that assumed the river would always carry more water than it actually does in normal or dry years, setting up a system guaranteed to fail once conditions return to historical average or worse. And worse is exactly what's happening. Major cities like Los Angeles, Phoenix, Las Vegas, and San Diego depend on Colorado River water for a significant portion of their supply, and as the river shrinks, these urban areas face the possibility of mandatory rationing restrictions on growth and potentially having to find alternative water sources that may not exist at the scale required to sustain millions of people living in desert environments that cannot support such populations without massive water importation. Agricultural interests face even more immediate threats, with farms that have relied on Colorado River irrigation for generations suddenly finding their water allocations cut, forcing them to leave fields, fallow, abandon crops, or drill deeper wells that tap underground aquifers, already being depleted faster than they can recharge, creating a cascade of failures that will impact food production throughout the region. But beyond the economic and environmental catastrophe, there's something else happening as the Colorado River shrinks, something that brings us back to the mysteries of the Grand Canyon. Because as water levels drop, things that were submerged for decades are being revealed. Ancient structures that hadn't seen sunlight in generations are now exposed. Geological features that were hidden beneath the surface are visible for the first time in modern history. And people are starting to ask what else might be down there. What other secrets has the receding water uncovered? Subscribe and hit that notification bell, because what we're about to reveal about another river on the other side of the world will show you that this isn't just a local crisis. This is a global pattern with biblical implications. 7,000 miles away from the Grand Canyon, Another river is experiencing the exact same phenomenon, the Euphrates River. One of the most historically significant waterways in human civilization is drying up at an alarming rate, and what's emerging from its receding waters has scholars, scientists, and religious leaders equally terrified, because this river isn't just mentioned in history books, it's mentioned in biblical prophecy, specifically in passages describing the end times. The Euphrates is one of two great rivers that defined ancient Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers where human civilization as we know it began, where the first cities were built, where writing was invented, where agriculture transformed human society from nomadic hunter-gatherers to settled communities capable of supporting specialized craftsmen, artists, priests, and kings. Flowing nearly 1,740 miles from the mountains of Turkey through Syria and Iraq before joining with the Tigris River to form the Shatt al-Arab waterway that empties into the Persian Gulf. The Euphrates sustained the Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian empires, providing water for irrigation, enabling trade and commerce, creating the conditions necessary for civilization to flourish in an otherwise harsh desert environment. The ancient cities of Babylon, Ur, and Uruk all rose along the banks of the Euphrates, drawing their prosperity and power from the river that made life possible in the Fertile Crescent, the region that archaeologists call the cradle of civilization. But today, this river that has flowed continuously for thousands of years, supporting empire after empire, witnessing the rise and fall of countless kingdoms, is shrinking dramatically, with water levels dropping so low that sections which were once navigable by large boats are now barely streams that can be crossed on foot. The causes mirror those affecting the Colorado River Dam construction in Turkey that diverts water for hydroelectric power and irrigation before it reaches downstream nations. Climate change, reducing rainfall, and increasing evaporation, agricultural demands that extract more water than the river can sustainably provide, and decades of conflict and instability that have prevented regional cooperation on water management. Millions of people in Syria and Iraq face severe water shortages, with farms dying, crops failing, and communities that have existed for thousands of years now forced to abandon their ancestral lands because the river that sustained them for generations can no longer support human habitation. But as terrible as this humanitarian crisis is, it's what the receding waters are revealing that has captured worldwide attention. In 2022, as water levels dropped, archaeologists rushed to document ancient structures emerging from the riverbed before they were exposed to air, and began deteriorating structures that had been submerged and protected for decades, or in some cases centuries, suddenly visible and accessible for investigation. They discovered a 3,400-year-old city from the Mitanni Empire, complete with massive walls, fortification towers, and buildings constructed from mud brick that had somehow survived submersion because they were covered in sediment that protected them from the erosive force of the water. A city that was flooded when a reservoir was created decades ago and is now re-emerging as that reservoir dries up. The layout of the city suggests it was an important regional center, possibly an administrative hub or trading post, with evidence of sophisticated urban planning, water management systems, and construction techniques that demonstrate the advanced capabilities of Bronze Age civilizations. Inside the buildings, archaeologists found clay jars containing cuneiform tablets, still sealed in their original clay envelopes, perfectly preserved by the anaerobic conditions at the bottom of the reservoir. Tablets that contain administrative records, legal documents, possibly correspondence between rulers, and everyday records of commercial transactions that provide a window into the daily life of people who lived over 3 millennia ago. These tablets are like time capsules waiting to be opened and read by scholars who can decipher the ancient languages, offering insights we would never have without this accidental preservation. But the ancient city wasn't the most disturbing discovery. As the Euphrates continued to shrink, explorers in the Kurdish region of Iraq found something that defies easy explanation: a network of caves connected by tunnels carved into the rock with features that don't match natural cave formations. The walls inside these caves show evidence of deliberate shaping, with smooth surfaces and geometric patterns that suggest human construction, and most unsettling, the caves contain formations that look disturbingly like prison bars, vertical stone pillars, arranged in a way that seems designed to contain something rather than provide shelter or storage. Who built these underground chambers? What were they designed to hold? And why are they located precisely where biblical prophecy said they would be? Because the book of Revelation, chapter 9, verses 14 and 15, contains a specific prophecy that mentions the Euphrates River by name, describing 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates, waiting for an appointed time when they will be released to kill 1/3 of humanity. Then the 6th angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar, which is before God, saying to the 6th angel, who had the trumpet, "Release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates." So the 4 angels who had been prepared for the hour and day and month and year were released to kill 1/3 of mankind. For nearly 2,000 years, scholars have debated what this passage means, where exactly these angels are bound, and what form their prison takes. But now as the Euphrates dries and caves with prison-like features are discovered in the exact location specified in prophecy, people are beginning to wonder if this ancient text wasn't symbolic after all. Could these caves be the actual prison where fallen angels have been bound for millennia? Are we witnessing the fulfillment of prophecy as the waters recede and reveal what has been hidden? And if that seems too fantastic to believe, consider that researchers and locals who have ventured near these caves report hearing sounds that make their blood run cold, groaning and wailing that seems to come from deep underground sounds that witnesses describe as anguished, as if something is in pain or struggling against restraints. Some have reported hearing what sounds like chains dragging across stone, echoing up from depths that haven't been explored, sounds that have no natural explanation in geological terms. Religious communities, both Christian and Muslim, have interpreted these discoveries as signs that we are living in the final days before divine judgment. Islamic prophecy specifically mentions the Euphrates River in hadiths narrated by the Prophet Muhammad, who lived 1,400 years ago. The Prophet said the Euphrates will uncover a mountain of gold, and people will fight over it, with 99 out of every 100 dying in the conflict, each one believing they will be the survivor. Another hadith states the hour will not come until the Euphrates uncovers a treasure of gold, so whoever witnesses it should not take anything from it. Both Christian and Islamic traditions warn about the same river, describing treasures or secrets being revealed, describing conflict and death associated with these discoveries, and both prophecies being spoken thousands of years before the current crisis. 2 rivers, the Colorado and the Euphrates, thousands of miles apart, both drying simultaneously, both revealing secrets, both connected to ancient prophecies about the end times. Coincidence? Or are we watching something far more significant unfold before our eyes, something that was predicted millennia ago, something that means time is running out? Everything we've uncovered points to one inescapable reality. The signs are converging, the prophecies are aligning, and the world is rushing toward a moment that was foretold thousands of years ago, a moment when everything hidden will be revealed, when everything sealed will be opened, when the truth that authorities have worked so hard to suppress will become undeniable. The Grand Canyon, with its forbidden zones, its mysterious doorways, its alleged Egyptian city, and its government cover-ups, isn't just a geological wonder. It's a testimony to the fact that our understanding of history is incomplete, that powerful institutions have hidden evidence that contradicts official narratives, and that ancient civilizations possessed knowledge and capabilities we've been told didn't exist. The drying rivers aren't just environmental crises, they're prophetic markers specifically mentioned in Scripture as signs of the end times. The Colorado River, revealing long submerged secrets in the heart of America, and the Euphrates River on the other side of the world, uncovering ancient cities, prison-like caves, and possibly the very locations where fallen angels have been bound for millennia, waiting for their appointed time of release. The caves with their disturbing formations, the sounds of groaning and chains, the strange phenomena reported by visitors, the artifacts that carry curses, the restricted zones that authorities refuse to explain, all of these point to something beyond natural explanation, something spiritual. Something that connects the physical world we can see and touch to the unseen realm of angels, demons, and divine judgment. Smash that subscribe button and leave a comment right now telling us whether you believe we're living in the final generation before Christ returns, because what happens next will determine where you spend eternity. The book of Revelation describes a series of judgments that will fall upon the earth before Jesus Christ returns to establish his kingdom. 7 seals. 7 trumpets and 7 bowls of wrath, each more severe than the last, designed to bring rebellious humanity to repentance before it's too late. The 6th trumpet specifically mentions the release of 4 angels bound at the Euphrates. Angels prepared for the exact hour and day and month and year they would be unleashed to kill 1/3 of the world's population through an army of 200 million that brings fire, smoke, and sulfur. With the global population at 8 billion people, that means over 2.5 billion deaths, the largest catastrophe in human history, dwarfing every war, plague, and natural disaster combined. And those angels are bound at the Euphrates, the very river that is drying up right now, the river where caves are being discovered, caves that look like prisons' caves from which disturbing sounds emerge. Chapter 1. The parallel prophecy in Revelation chapter 16 verse 12 states, "Then the sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up so that the way of the kings from the east might be prepared." The river drying prepares the way for a massive army from the east. This isn't metaphor, this isn't symbolism. This is literal prophecy, describing exactly what we're witnessing in our time. But here's what most people don't understand: even after these catastrophic judgments, even after 1/3 of humanity is killed, even after the earth is devastated by plagues and disasters. Revelation 9 verses 20 and 21 tells us, "But the rest of mankind who were not killed by these plagues did not repent of the works of their hands, that they should not worship demons and idols of gold, silver, brass, stone, and wood, which can neither see nor hear nor walk. And they did not repent of their murders or their sorceries or their sexual immorality or their thefts." Despite everything, despite undeniable proof of God's existence and power, humanity will refuse to repent, will continue in rebellion, and will choose destruction over submission to their Creator. This is how deep the deception goes. This is how thoroughly Satan has blinded the minds of people that, even facing annihilation, they would rather die than admit they were wrong. But you don't have to be among them. The Bible is clear that God takes no pleasure in the death of the wicked, that He desires all people to come to repentance, that the reason He delays judgment is to give every possible opportunity for people to turn from sin and choose life. 2 Peter 3 verse 9 says, "The Lord is not slack concerning His promise, as some count slackness, but is long-suffering towards us, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance." Every sign, every discovery, every prophecy being fulfilled is God's way of warning humanity that the time is short. The end is approaching. Choose wisely before it's too late. The Grand Canyon discovers the drying rivers, the emerging caves, the ancient cities, the mysterious sounds. All of it is evidence that we are living in the generation that will see the return of Jesus Christ. Matthew 24 verse 34 records Jesus saying, "Assuredly I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place." What generation? The generation that sees all the signs converging together, the generation that witnesses Israel re-established as a nation. After 2,000 years of dispersion, the generation that sees wars and rumors of wars, famines, earthquakes, pestilences, global communication technology making it possible for the whole world to witness events simultaneously. Our generation. The discoveries in the Grand Canyon aren't random, they're revelations. The government restrictions aren't about safety, they're about control. The Smithsonian denials aren't about protecting science, they're about suppressing truth. And the truth is that ancient civilizations knew things we've forgotten. Giants walked the earth, just as Genesis describes advanced technologies that existed before the flood. Catastrophic events reshaped our world, and the spiritual realm is far more real and far more dangerous than modern materialistic science wants to admit. No. Jesus warned His disciples in Luke 21 verses 25 through 28, "And there will be signs in the sun and the moon, and in the stars, and on the earth distress of nations. With perplexity the sea and the waves, roaring men's hearts, failing them, from fear and the expectation of those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. Now, when these things begin to happen, look up and lift up your heads, because your redemption draws near." The signs are happening now. The nations are in distress. The earth is groaning. The seas are troubled. People are filled with fear about the future. And hidden beneath the Grand Canyon, buried under centuries of cover-ups and denial, lies evidence that connects our present moment to ancient prophecies. We see evidence that shows we're not just experiencing random environmental crises or political upheavals. We're watching the precise fulfillment of warnings given thousands of years ago. What was found in the Grand Canyon? Evidence that time is running out, evidence that the end is closer than most people realize, evidence that Jesus wasn't speaking metaphorically when He described the signs of His return. The rivers are drying, the caves are opening, the angels are stirring, and humanity remains asleep, distracted by entertainment, politics, and the endless pursuit of comfort, while the world rushes toward the moment when everything changes. But for those with eyes to see and ears to hear, the message is clear. Get ready. Because Jesus warned us about this exact moment, and for most people it will be too late to realize what's happening until judgment has already begun. The question isn't whether these prophecies will be fulfilled, the question is whether you'll be ready when they are.